Let's take a look at some video clips from OTAs featuring Toney, Justyn Ross, and more, talk about the new NFL rule changes and Townsend, among others, not being too happy about it, Mahomes and Coach Reid hyping up the receiving room such as Justyn and John Ross, and much freaking more. But first, how about those? All right, first up, Charger safety Derwin James was recently on an episode of Cold as Balls, just like saying that word, with Kevin Hart, and he had a little snippet in there worth sharing about the Chiefs.
Who are you going above and beyond to prepare for?
The team that just won the Super Bowl because they're in our division.
What player on that team has you looking at their routes to be a step ahead what you think is coming?
I feel like everybody come to pay to watch number 87 and number 3 go.
So of course the Chargers want to knock the Chiefs off. I mean, I would be annoyed too if my division rival kept winning all the time, like literally all the time, makes it to the postseason 8 years in a row, keeps winning Super Bowls, and their tight end keeps catching game-winning passes against them. I get it. Although Derwin James against Travis Kelce is indeed always a fun watch, and I would feel bad if I ended this segment without playing a clip from this interview of the Raiders getting roasted. So here you go.
The expectation every year is to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going into the season not trying to win the Super Bowl, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but every team doesn't
like
have that. The Raiders aren't going into the season like, we got to win a Super Bowl.
They better be.
The Raiders just show up.
Kevin is right. The Raiders just show up. They ain't out here really trying to win, and they definitely aren't out here thinking they're going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, Devontae Adams may think so, but that man is delusional. So let's just move on from one great team in the AFC West to another in the Broncos, because they unexpectedly released their veteran kicker Brandon McManus yesterday. And get this, upon his release, there are now no more active players on the Broncos roster that have ever obtained a victory against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's right, McManus has been in Denver since 2014, and with their last victory against the Chiefs being September of 2015, he was the last guy to remember beating the Chiefs, which is kind of sad, but I kind of love it.
It's been 84 years.
Regardless of that fact, it's interesting to see the Broncos cut McManus so late, but I am sure Sean Payton over there has a plan. I just hope it's not a good plan, because I would like to see the Chiefs sweep the Broncos once again this season. And then let's move along to some winners, because the Chiefs have been busy at OTAs this week, and from the limited media that was shared, you could see Mahomes connecting with tight end Jody Fortson on a pass, as well as MVS via a nice sideline toe drag catch. And it appears Mahomes is still working on his behind the back pass, though if we will ever see it in a game remains to be seen. Toney is looking twitchy as ever as he runs a route right here, and then he could be seen catching a pass on the sideline from Patrick Mahomes, one of many to come, promise you that. Then Justyn Ross could be seen doing some drills himself, as well as practicing punt returns, and while I doubt he is a returner for the Chiefs based on the fact that he didn't really return in college, he did return 14 punts for 383 yards and 2 touchdowns his senior year of high school, but take that for what you will. Coach Reid actually spoke very highly of Justyn Ross today, and the most interesting part to me was that he brought Justyn up unprompted when he was asked about John Ross. And while he complimented both Rosses, he referred to Justyn as Tall Ross and John as Lil Ross. Sounds like a rap name. He spent more time on Justyn, saying he's coming along, looks good, feels good, talking about his body. The foot surgery has worked out well, and he's made some nice plays already. And then he mentioned Mahomes has trust in him as well, which is good to see. And then about John, quote, he's extremely fast and quick, and he likes what he sees from him. He can skedaddle and is very smart. You like that word, skedaddle? And on the subject of John Ross, Pete Sweeney of Arrowhead Pride is liking what he saw from him today, saying that John Ross's speed is unreal. The 27-year-old showed every bit of that 4.22 speed as he raced past 2 defenders in red zone 7-on-7 for an easy touchdown. And this is a side note, but Pete Sweeney also mentioned that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is also looking good out there, and he's getting extra looks, extra reps, etc., because Isaiah Pacheco can't yet really participate in practice due to his off-season surgeries. And then back to John Ross real quick, because PJ Green also said that John Ross is still a first-round talent, and so there you go, some definite, very early John and Justyn Ross hype, though how the hype holds up over the month is still the golden question. Do these guys have what it takes to make the Chiefs roster? That is a very competitive room, which we're going to get to in a second. But first, I got to touch on another receiver real quick, and that is the rookie, Rashee Rice, because Patrick Mahomes likes the feel. That's the word he used. The feel he has when running routes. He said Rice has the explosiveness and the jump ball ability, but already has a veteran-type mindset as a wide receiver and being able to pull up at the right spot in zone coverages, and he believes Rice will have an impact on the offense this year. And I found the compliment about Rice in zone coverage intriguing, because because if he is indeed taking over Juju's role, coming alive against zone coverage in the middle of the field is definitely a must. Mahomes also complimented the entire receiving corps, saying the receiving room is very deep and he could see how most of these guys, or maybe even he said every one of these guys, could have a path of making the team. Quote, a lot of competition in that room, but I'm happy with where we are at. The next thing I found interesting was the fact that Coach Reid basically alluded to the Chiefs moving away from a fullback this season and opting instead to carry an extra tight end. He said he would go back to a fullback, that's not a problem, but quote, you normally don't have the number of tight ends that we got here, which I took to mean they are very happy with their tight end room and want more of them available during a game rather than a failed fullback dive on 3rd and 1 time and time again. Speaking of tight ends, Pete Sweeney had a note on Matt Bushman today. He said he had the reception lead on the day. He counted at least 5 from him. Bushman caught at least 1 pass from Mahomes, Blaine Gabbert, and Buechele, all during teamwork, including one over linebacker Willie Gay Jr. And yeah, this man is the one who went off last preseason against the Packers, I believe it was, until he broke his clavicle. So he is one to watch as well. Maybe if they opt to go with another tight end rather than a fullback like they're saying, he could be the one to sneak on the roster. But the craziest part of all of this is if the Chiefs really move away from a fullback this season, I think that's going to be the first time ever that Andy Reid won't have a fullback on the team since he's become a head coach. So times are changing. Anyway, speaking of change, Coach Reid is glad to have Blaine Gabbert here in KC, mentioning that he's already developed a great relationship with Pat and is currently getting acclimated. And while having a veteran presence around Mahomes isn't as important these days as it was earlier in his career, it's not a bad way to go in case of a Mahomes injury. And he referred back to the times Henne came in clutch. Mahomes spoke about Gabbert as well, saying he's been a true pro, and since he was previously backing up who Mahomes calls the GOAT in Tom Brady, he's asking him for any advice he can get because it'll only help. Another new face around the building is offensive tackle Donovan Smith, who described last year as a frustrating year for him, saying he played through more injuries than he probably should have, but sometimes that's the name of the game, and though he's still feeling things out here in KC, he's excited for the new beginning and new journey, especially now that he's fresh and healthy. Coach Reid noted that they did have Jawan Taylor at left and Niang at right for a few practices, but now that Donovan Smith is here, my takeaway from Andy Reid's thoughts, I'm surmising a bit here, but it's more than likely going to be Donovan Smith on the left side and Jawan on the right, but we will see about that as time goes on. And speaking of vets, veteran Chris Jones was not seen out at OTAs, which isn't unusual as this is still voluntary. And then there were a couple of other players out there, but not wearing helmets or really participating. And those were cornerbacks L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie. And when asked about it, Andy Reid said he wouldn't get into any injury updates or details, but quote, they are just going easy and we are easing them back. So I would take it that both Sneed and McDuffie are dealing with a minor injury of some sort, but it's still early and I would not be too concerned. Next up, Mahomes was asked about his current contract and his mindset right now, and he sees more and more QBs continuing to get paid. And Patrick's response was, me, my agent, and the team always keep open communication. We try to do what is best for the team, but obviously I want to do the best for myself as well. But at the same time, I always said I worry about the legacy and winning rings more than making money at this moment. So take that, Fluoride Florio. He then said, we keep open communication as we see what's going on around the league, but at the same time, I'll never do anything that's going to hurt us from keeping great players around me. So yeah, he's not worried about being the highest paid per year QB. He said again that he's made plenty of money, but you got to find the line between how much to get paid and saving some to build the best roster possible. He also seems like he is pro extend L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones, because when talking about the balance between getting paid enough and leaving some for others, he said, you got guys like Chris and Sneed and all these guys that you need to keep around you to have a great team. He mentioned Kelsey as well, but we know Kelsey is still under contract. Meanwhile, CJ and Sneed are on contract years, the last year of their current deals. And I like the idea of both of those guys sticking around. Please and thank you. And what's going to happen with Patrick Mahomes? Will he get a pay bump before the season starts like Fluoride Florio says? No idea. I would not complain if he did. He deserves it and more, but we will have to find out as time moves along. Next up, we got to talk about some of these NFL rule changes that have been approved this week because there have been several. First up is the change the majority of people probably agreed with the most, and that was the emergency third quarterback rule. I did talk about this the other day, but here is a refresher before we move on to the other rule changes. Basically, because of the unlucky disaster that struck the 49ers in the NFC Championship game with all their QBs getting injured, and Christian McCaffrey almost needing to play quarterback. That got the owners thinking that this may not be so good for ratings, and therefore teams will now be allowed to carry a third active quarterback on game day without using an active roster spot. And how that works, from what I understand, is the emergency QB will not count against the 48 players that are allowed to dress on game day. It's a little confusing, but even though teams are allowed to have a 53-man roster, only 46 were allowed to dress out for quite a while, but that got changed to 48 in 2020, and I believe that's what it still is today. But it looks like the emergency QB will not count against the 48 players that can dress out, so they kind of get 49 players now, but with a few caveats. The third QB must be on the 53-man roster and cannot be a practice squad call-up, and can only play in the game if the first two QBs have to leave due to injury. And if either of them are cleared to return by the medical staff, the emergency third QB must be removed from the game. So, for example, let's say in the divisional round against the Jags when Mahomes was injured and Henney came in, if Henney somehow got injured on that drive as well, thank God he didn't, the Chiefs' emergency third QB would have been Jerick McKinnon, because even though they had 3 QBs on their 53-man roster, Shane Buechele was not one of the 48 players that suited up. But this season, if Buechele is QB3, he can be the emergency QB and will be able to suit up for every game. Good news. All right, enough of that one. Let's move on to the next two that were definitely not received as well, with one of them being flex scheduling of Thursday Night Football getting approved. However, it is a modified proposal that got approved. So Thursday night games can now be flexed only between weeks 13 and 17 with a 4-week notice required. And on top of that, only 2 Thursday night games can be flexed per year, and this change is on a trial basis for the 2023 season. So basically the likelihood of a Thursday night football flex happening is going to be pretty rare, but it could happen a couple of times late this upcoming season. And honestly, aside from the issue of player safety, different combo entirely, but more on that later, I think it's a logistical nightmare for everyone involved, especially the fans. Though the 30-day notice should help a bit with that, sorta, kinda, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, after that change was announced, another followed, with that one being a rule change for the kickoffs, which is only set for the 2023 season, much like the Thursday Night Football flex, to see how it goes. Anyway, the rule change is that players can now fair catch on kickoffs anywhere behind the 25-yard line, and the result will be the same as a touchback, with the ball being placed at the 25. And to be clear, this is only on a kickoff or safety kick, not a punt. And basically every special teams coach and many special teams players were against the rule change, but the NFL said the concussion rate on kickoffs has gone up because more kicks are being hung inside the 5-yard line, forcing a return. And the average kickoff return is somewhere around the 24-yard line anyway. So the thought is just call for a fair catch and get it on the 25 with less risk of collisions, aka less concussions. Again, though, many players and coaches are not happy about this. Pat McAfee said, "This is a joke." Content creator Mr. Hurricane said, "Imagine my excitement when the season opens with a fair catch at the 8-yard line." And then the Chiefs' own punter, Townsend, said, "Not good for football for many reasons." But let's pass something that players and coaches are so clearly against. Thumbs up, aka you guys are idiots. I did see an interesting counter to this rule change, though, that if a fair catch is called for on a kickoff, they should get the ball on the 20 instead of the 25, which could incentivize these guys to go ahead and take it out. But again, if the league's trying to limit the amount of concussions that are happening on kickoffs, I don't see that one being employed. They're basically encouraging players to fair catch and not return it. Anyway, with all that being said, what do you guys think about these rule changes? Do you think it's a bit hypocritical to preach player safety on kickoffs yet be willing to flex a team to an additional midweek game that allows for less rest? I mean, the league also added a 17th regular season game in recent years, took 1 bye week away from the 2 seed in the postseason, added more international games, and the list goes on about doing things that may show they care more about making money than they do about player safety. I mean, these little in-game rule changes affect their pocketbooks 0%. So you guys tell me, is it really about player safety or nah? Let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?